I never thought I'd be the guy with the cheating wife. That's something that happens to other people, right? Not to Mason Bennett, reliable software engineer at Cascade Tech. But there I was, staring at Rebecca's phone, my hands trembling as I read message after message between her and David, my boss. "I miss your touch already," he wrote. "Last night was incredible." Her response made me physically ill. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Mason thinks I'm having lunch with Sarah. I found out by accident." Rebecca had asked me to check a notification while she was in the shower. One message from Dave Work popped up that seemed odd too familiar. Something made me open it, and then I saw months of conversations, explicit photos, plans for their meetups, hotel receipts. I sat there on our grey sectional couch, the one we'd spent weeks choosing together, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The shower was still running. Steam billowed from under the bathroom doors. I scrolled back through their history. They'd been sleeping together for over a year. A year! While I worked 60-hour weeks on David's team to secure our future. When Rebecca emerged from the bathroom, her copper hair wrapped in a towel, green eyes bright, she immediately knew something was wrong. She saw her phone in my hand, and her expression shifted from confusion to anger. Not guilt, but anger. "You went through my phone?" she snapped, snatching it away. "You're sleeping with David." My voice sounded strange, hollow. She didn't deny it. Instead, she laughed, actually laughed, and said, "What did you expect, Mason? You're never home. You're boring. All you do is work and play video games." "He's my boss, Rebecca. My boss. At least he knows what he wants. At least he has ambition." She tossed her towel aside, those green eyes I once loved now cold and dismissive. "David's going places. You're just comfortable." I remember standing up, trying to find words. "I've been working those hours for us, for our future. A future where you're still a code monkey while guys like David run the company." She shook her head, droplets of water flinging from her hair. "I need more than that." "So our 5 years of marriage means nothing?" That's when she said it, words that would echo in my head for months. "Face it, Mason, you'll never do better than me. Never. I'm the best thing that ever happened to you." I moved into Jake's spare room that night. The next few days were a blur of calling in sick to work, ignoring David's messages, and staring at the ceiling. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. All I could think about were those messages, and Rebecca's cruel dismissal of our life together. "You'll never do better than me." Maybe she was right. At 30, I was just another programmer in Seattle, nothing special, no remarkable achievements, just a guy who thought working hard and being loyal meant something. I had no idea then that her betrayal would be the catalyst for everything that came next. After a week at Jake's place, I made the mistake of trying to save my marriage. Rebecca agreed to meet at our favorite coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory. She arrived 20 minutes late, looking immaculate in a designer outfit I'd never seen before. "Probably a gift from David. I think we should try counseling," I said, after awkward small talk. "We built something good together, Rebecca. We can fix this." She stirred her latte slowly, her wedding ring catching the light. "I don't think there's anything to fix, Mason." 5 years of marriage isn't worth fighting for? "Look," she sighed, tucking a strand of copper hair behind her ear. "I care about you, I do, but I'm not in love with you anymore. David and I, it's different." "Different how?" I asked, my voice cracking. "He challenges me. He's exciting. When we're together, I feel alive." She reached across the table, touching my hand in what I suppose she thought was compassion. "You're a good man. You deserve someone who appreciates your qualities." My qualities, I repeated. You mean my boring, unambitious qualities? Her silence was answer enough. I tried anyway. For 2 more weeks I sent texts, suggested therapists, even sent flowers to our house. Rebecca's responses grew increasingly irritated. The final blow came when I stopped by to pick up more clothes and found David's car in our driveway. They were in our kitchen, drinking wine and laughing. Rebecca looked startled when I walked in, but David just smirked, comfortable in my home, with my wife. Mason, Rebecca said, standing up. We didn't expect you. Clearly. I looked at David. Enjoying yourself in my house, boss? Look, Bennett, he said, using my last name like we were at work. This is awkward for everyone. Rebecca and I didn't plan this, but sometimes these things happen. Things like sleeping with your employee's wife? Those kinds of things? Rebecca stepped between us. Mason, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact yours. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. You've already filed. It's for the best, she said, not meeting my eyes. Clean break. I looked around our kitchen, the blue backsplash we'd installed together, the cookbook collection we'd built, the stupid magnetic spice rack I'd given her for Christmas. All of it suddenly felt like props in someone else's life. I'll get my things. And go, I said quietly. As I packed, Rebecca followed me to the bedroom. I hope we can be civil about this. I'm not asking for much in the settlement. How generous of you, I muttered, stuffing clothes into a duffel bag. This hostility isn't necessary, she said, crossing her arms. People grow apart. It happens. I zipped up my bag and faced her. People don't grow apart, Rebecca. People make choices. You chose him, her face hardened. Yes, I did. And honestly, it was the easiest choice I've ever made. That's when something broke inside me. I walked past her, down the stairs and paused. At the front door, David was still sitting at my kitchen counter drinking my wine. I quit, I told him. Expect my resignation email tomorrow? Rebecca appeared behind me. Don't be stupid, Mason. Where will you go? What will you do? I turned to look at her one last time. Her final words followed me out the door. You'll crash and burn without me. You know that, right? You'll never find anyone who puts up with your mediocrity like I did. The door slammed behind me, and with it, my old life ended. I had no wife, no job, and no idea what came next. All I knew was that I couldn't sink any lower. I was wrong about that. The next 3 months were the darkest of my life. I moved from Jake's spare room to a depressing studio apartment in Belltown. The divorce proceedings dragged on, with Rebecca's lawyer picking apart our assets like vultures on carrion. I signed whatever they put in front of me, just wanting it to be over. Each morning, I'd wake up and stare at the ceiling, Rebecca's words echoing in my head. You'll never do better than me. Some days I couldn't find the energy to shower. I survived, on delivery pizza and beer, watching my bank account dwindle as I half-heartedly applied for jobs. Seattle's tech scene is small, word gets around. Nobody said it directly, but I knew the whispers. That's Mason Bennett, the guy whose wife left him for David Keller. Interviews would start promisingly, then fizzle out after the inevitable, "Why did you leave Cascade Tech?" question. My parents called from Phoenix, concerned about my increasingly rare and brief communications. I lied, told them I was fine, just busy with a new project. I couldn't bear their disappointment. Their golden boy, the first college graduate, in the family, now a divorced, unemployed cliché. One rainy Tuesday, though, in Seattle, that hardly narrows it down, I hit bottom. I was 3 beers in by noon, scrolling through social media when I saw it. Rebecca and David in Maui, her tanned body in a white bikini, his arm around her waist, both grinning at the camera. The caption read, "New beginnings with this amazing man." Blessed, I hurled my phone across the room, shattering the screen against the wall. Then I did something that terrifies me to remember. I opened my laptop and typed how to disappear completely. For a brief, dark moment, I considered more permanent solutions. That's when Jake used his spare key to check on me. He found me on the floor, surrounded by empty bottles and takeout containers, unshowered for days, staring blankly at suicide methods on my laptop screen. "Jesus Christ, Mason," he said, closing my laptop. "This ends now." He dragged me into the shower, clothes and all, and turned the cold water on full blast. As I sputtered and cursed, he said words I'll never forget. "You get 1 week to mourn, man. 1 week to feel sorry for yourself. Then you fight back." "Fight back how?" I asked, shivering under the spray. "She won. David won. This isn't about them anymore," Jake said firmly. "This is about you deciding who Mason Bennett really is." After forcing me to eat a real meal, Jake outlined what he called Operation Phoenix. First step, clean the apartment. Second, daily exercise. Third, therapy. Fourth, career planning. "I can't afford therapy," I protested. "I'm barely making rent." "My sister's a therapist, remember? She owes me favors." That night, Jake slept on my couch. The next morning, he physically pulled me out of bed at 6 a.m. and dragged me to a trail. In Discovery Park, we walked in silence as the sun rose over Puget Sound, painting the Olympic Mountains gold and pink. "Look at that," Jake said, pointing to the view. "That was here before Rebecca. It'll be here after her. Your life is bigger than what happened to you." I wanted to dismiss his words as greeting card philosophy, but something about the vastness of the mountains and water broke through my fog. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath that didn't hurt. "I don't know who I am without her," I admitted. "That's the point," Jake replied. "Neither do I, neither do you, but I'm excited to find out." The next day, I met Jake's sister Melissa for my first therapy session. I expected platitudes about time healing all wounds. Instead, she handed me a journal. "Write down every time you hear Rebecca's voice in your head," she instructed. "Then write what you'd say back if you were your own best friend." It seemed stupid, but I was desperate. That night, I wrote my first entry. "You'll never do better than me." My response? "Maybe not, but I can do better than this." It wasn't much, but it was a start. 2 weeks into Operation Phoenix, I still didn't believe in it. The morning runs with Jake felt like torture. The therapy sessions with Melissa left me emotionally drained. The job applications went unanswered, but I kept going through the motions, if only because Jake wouldn't let me quit. "You need purpose," Jake said one morning, as we cooled down after a run. "What did you want to do before Cascade Tech?" The question caught me off guard. Before Cascade, I'd been developing an app to help small businesses manage inventory and customer relationships. I abandoned it when Rebecca convinced me to take the stable corporate job. "I had this idea for a startup," I admitted. "A small business software suite." "Why'd you drop it?" I shrugged. "Rebecca thought it was too risky." Jake's expression hardened. "And now?" "Now I've got nothing to lose." That afternoon, I dusted off my old code repository. The project felt like meeting an old friend, familiar but different. As I reacquainted myself with my work, something unexpected happened. I got excited. Ideas flowed. Problems that had stumped me years ago now seemed solvable. I worked through the night, forgetting to eat until Jake dropped by with takeout the next morning. "You look like hell," he said, eyeing my unshaven face and bloodshot eyes. "But also—" "Better? I think I'm onto something," I replied, showing him the prototype. "If I can get this working, there's a real market for it." For the first time since the divorce, I had direction. I created a schedule. Mornings for exercise, days for coding, evenings for learning business development. I joined a co-working space to get out of my depressing apartment. The routine became my lifeline. Physically, changes came slowly. The daily runs became less painful. I started adding strength training. I cut out alcohol and junk food, not from discipline, but because they slowed my thinking. My clothes began fitting differently. In therapy, Melissa pushed me to examine patterns in my relationship with Rebecca. "You mentioned she made most of the decisions," she noted during one session. "She was more decisive," I defended. "I just wanted her to be happy." "And what about your happiness?" The question lingered with me for days. Had I ever prioritized my own happiness? Or had I always been seeking approval from Rebecca, from David, from my parents? 1 month in, I landed my first consulting client through a connection at the co-working space. The project was small, but it validated my expertise and funded further development of my app. More importantly, it forced me to present my ideas confidently, something Rebecca had convinced me I couldn't do. "You're too technical," she'd say, before company parties. Let me do the talking. Now I had no choice but to find my voice. My first client presentation was a disaster. I rambled, spoke too quickly, and used too much jargon. But instead of quitting, I joined a local Toastmasters group. Each speech was terrifying, but incrementally less so. Small victories accumulated. I completed my first 5K run. I signed 2 more clients. I reconnected with college friends Rebecca had deemed not ambitious enough for our social circle. I started cooking for myself, discovering I enjoyed it. The most significant change came in therapy. After 2 months of sessions, Melissa asked a question that shifted everything. "What if Rebecca did you a favor?" My instinct was anger. "A favor? By cheating? By humiliating me?" "By forcing you to rebuild," she clarified. "The Mason I'm seeing now, passionate, determined, growing, were you that person with her?" I wanted to say yes, but honesty prevailed. "No, I was comfortable, safe. And now? Now I'm scared all the time," I admitted, "but also more alive." That night, I looked in the mirror and truly saw myself for the first time in months. I'd lost weight. My posture had improved, but the real change was in my eyes. They had purpose again. I opened my journal and wrote, "You'll never do better than me." Then my response, "I'm already doing better than the man who was with you." It wasn't about Rebecca anymore. It was about becoming someone I respected. 6 months after Rebecca walked out of my life, I barely recognized my own reflection. The daily runs had evolved into training for a half marathon. My body had transformed from soft and neglected to lean and strong, but the physical changes paled compared to what was happening professionally. My app, now called Vendor Vault, had gained traction with local businesses. What started as a side project had become a viable startup, with 5 employees working from a small office in South Lake Union. We weren't profitable yet, but investor interest was growing. I'd taken a crash course in business development, pitching to anyone who would listen. "You're a natural at this," said my lead developer, Sarah, after I closed our first significant investment round. "Hard to believe you were hiding in a cubicle, writing code for someone else." I didn't tell her that a year ago I couldn't have imagined speaking confidently to a room full of investors. That version of Mason had been buried under years of Rebecca's subtle, undermining therapy with Melissa. Had evolved too. Our sessions were less about processing trauma and more about building the future. One day, after describing a successful pitch meeting, I realized something had changed in our dynamic. "You seem different today," I said. Melissa smiled. "How so?" "Less therapist-like, more, I don't know, normal," she laughed. "Maybe because I'm not being your therapist today. My brother mentioned you haven't been to your running group in a while." "Been too busy with the business," I admitted. "Why?" "I joined that same group last month. Was hoping to see you there." The conversation shifted. For the first time, we talked as Mason and Melissa, not patient and therapist. She mentioned ethical boundaries. She couldn't be both my therapist and anything else, but suggested I might be ready to work with someone new. 2 weeks later, after a proper referral to another therapist, I asked Melissa to coffee. Our connection was immediate and natural, built on months of me sharing my deepest thoughts, but now balanced with me learning about her. Her passion for rock climbing, her terrible cooking skills, her collection of vintage psychology books. "I've watched you rebuild yourself," she said during our third date, a hike in the Cascades. "It's been remarkable." "I had good help," I replied, helping her over a fallen tree on the trail. "You did the work," she insisted. "I just asked questions." Vendervolt continued growing. We moved to a larger office, hired more staff. I started getting invitations to speak at tech conferences, something that would have terrified me before. Each time I stood at a podium, Rebecca's voice in my head grew fainter. "You're too boring, too awkward. No one wants to hear from you." I replaced those thoughts with evidence, packed rooms, engaged questions, business cards exchanged afterward. 1 year after the divorce, I bought a small house in Fremont with a view of the canal. It wasn't as luxurious as the home I'd shared with Rebecca, but it was entirely mine, decorated with furniture I chose, filled with books I wanted to read. Jake came over to help me move in, bringing beer to celebrate. "Remember when I found you on your apartment floor?" he asked as we sat on my new deck, watching boats pass. "Hard to forget," I admitted. "You saved my life that day." "Nah," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "I just reminded you that you had one worth saving." That night after Jake left, Melissa came over. We sat on the deck under the stars, her head on my shoulder, talking about everything and nothing. "Are you happy, Mason?" she asked softly. The question made me pause. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined happiness without Rebecca. Now I couldn't. Imagine going back to that half-life. "I am," I said, realizing the truth of it. Not because everything's perfect, but because I'm finally building a life that feels like mine. She squeezed my hand. "That's the difference between happiness and contentment. One depends on circumstances, the other comes from within." As we sat there, my phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made my heart skip. Seattle Tech Awards finalists announced. Vendervolt had been nominated for Breakthrough Startup of the Year. The ceremony would be in 2 weeks at the Grand Hyatt downtown, the same hotel where Cascade Tech held their annual gala, where David would certainly be in attendance, where, inevitably, I would face Rebecca for the first time in a year. The night of the Seattle Tech Awards arrived with a mixture of excitement and dread. Vendervolt was gaining recognition, but all I could think about was potentially seeing Rebecca. Melissa sensed my anxiety as we got ready. "You don't have to prove anything to her," she said, adjusting my tie. "Remember that?" I know, I replied, though part of me didn't believe it. It's just business. We arrived at the Grand Hyatt's ballroom, immediately surrounded by Seattle's tech elite. My team was already there, buzzing with nervous energy. As we found our table, I scanned the room, both dreading and hoping to see a flash of copper hair. Mason? Bennett? A voice behind me. I turned to see Alicia Winters, CEO of a major e-commerce platform. I've been following Vandervalt's growth, impressive pivot from corporate life. We chatted about potential partnerships, exchanged cards. 3 more industry leaders approached during cocktail hour. My old self would have shrunk from these conversations. Now I navigated them with unexpected ease. Halfway through dinner, I saw them, David and Rebecca, at Cascade Tech's table across the room. She wore a sleek black dress, hair styled in elegant waves. They looked like the power couple they'd always aspired to be. Rebecca hadn't noticed me yet. I excused myself and stepped onto the terrace for air, Melissa following. "You okay?" she asked, her hand warm against my back. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "Seeing her doesn't hurt like I thought it would." When we returned, Rebecca was looking directly at me, her expression unreadable. David whispered something in her ear. She nodded, then stood and made her way toward us. My heart hammered. Melissa squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'll give you space," before stepping away. Mason. Rebecca's voice was exactly as I remembered. "You look different." "It's been a year," I replied simply. Her eyes travelled over my transformed physique, lingered on my confident posture. "Vandervalt is yours. David mentioned it was nominated." "It is." "Congratulations," she said, sounding genuinely impressed. "I always said you had potential." The old Mason would have grasped at this crumb of approval. The new one recognized the subtle rewriting of history. "No," I corrected gently. "You always said I lacked ambition." She flushed slightly. "Well, clearly, I was wrong." An awkward silence fell. She glanced at Melissa, who was chatting with colleagues nearby. "Your date is beautiful," she observed. "How did you meet?" "Therapy," I answered honestly. "After you left." Rebecca's composure faltered. "Mason, about how things ended, it's okay," I interrupted. "It needed to happen." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I wasn't happy either, Rebecca. I just didn't know it. You leaving was the wake-up call I needed." Before she could respond, the announcer called for everyone to be seated for the awards. As I turned to go, Rebecca touched my arm. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for what I said that day about you never doing better." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but gratitude. "I'm not." Those words pushed me to prove you wrong, then to prove myself right. I rejoined my table as the Breakthrough Startup category was announced. When Vandervalt was called as the winner, my team erupted in cheers. Walking to the stage, I caught Rebecca's gaze. She was applauding, her expression a complex mixture of regret and admiration. At the podium, I thanked my team, our investors, and then paused. A year ago, I was at rock bottom. Someone told me I'd never do better than what I had. They were right, but not in the way they meant. I couldn't do better than that moment of loss because it showed me who I really am and what I'm capable of. Later, that night, Melissa and I walked along the waterfront, award in hand. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Closure?" I considered this. "Not closure, evolution. The Mason who loved Rebecca doesn't exist anymore, neither does the Mason she left." "And this Mason?" Melissa asked, stopping to face me. "Who is he?" I pulled her close, the Seattle skyline glittering behind her. Someone who finally understands that the best thing that ever happened to him wasn't a person, it was finding himself. Over her shoulder, I caught a glimpse of Rebecca and David. Leaving the hotel, Rebecca looked back once, our eyes meeting briefly. I nodded slightly, not in longing or anger, but acknowledgement of our shared past and separate futures. "You'll never do better than me," she had said. She was wrong. I did better than the man I was with her. I became someone who would never again make his happiness dependent on another person's approval. And that was worth everything I'd lost to find.